Party people, oh yeah, another Thursday, another Truth Project. It is so good to see y'all. Welcome back. I am excited, man. This is going to be a great conversation, party people. I really like the way that this conversation is going to kind of shape out. Just from the title, I have an idea of maybe what it could be like, and so I hope you guys enjoy it. Listen, this is if you're new here, all right, not your ordinary Bible study, okay? All right, we don't just hide around the bush, beat around the bush, man. We having sincere, heart-to-heart conversations, conversations that are necessary. That are happening all around the streets around us, man. We bringing it here, and of course, just looking to get to the truth about any and everything, man. So we're excited that you're here. Listen, invite somebody, send this link, share this out with somebody, man. Bring them to the table with you to share a part of this conversation, and we are so glad to have them just as much as we are to have you. And if you were here last week, all right, we did have some homework. We typically do some homework around here. It's just some Bible reading. We just get into the habit of getting that daily dose of the scroll in us. Okay. So we walking through Jeremiah. We are currently, I believe, if not entering halfway, or if not halfway, entering into the halfway point of the book. So if you guys want to join in on that, man, feel free, join in on the gravy train. We'd love to have you. If you haven't been reading that, but you've been reading something different, we would love to know where you're at. All right, what you're reading, share some thoughts that you've been studying on, some things you've been thinking on. We would love to hear it. YouTube, Twitch, Maverick.tv. We would love to just talk about it. And you guys actually have an opportunity to come through and get your Ninja membership, man. We might have some people that be willing to gift you while we are live over on YouTube and Twitch if you don't have it already. So you missing out. You missing out big time. There's so much other content going around over here, man, that you need to be a part of, and stuff that isn't getting uploaded on YouTube. And so we want you to be a part of it. So I believe we'll have !ninja in the chat somewhere where you guys can see the link to join up and be a part of this. All right. So without further ado, we're going to pray into this, kick it to a quick video, come back and have some phenomenal discussion. All right. So I hope you guys are excited. You're ready for it. Let's pray and dive into this. Lord, we thank you. We love you. And we ask for your wisdom and your presence in this time to open our hearts and minds to just encounter truth, engage with it, and walk away with so much different perspective, refreshing or perhaps transformational perspective, not just on this topic, but where we are in our life and where you're taking us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey there, everybody. What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Truth Project. Super excited that you're here tonight on behalf of Dion, Luke, Grape, and myself. Welcome in. If this is this is your very first time here, we're so excited to have you on whichever platform you are watching us on. But listen, let me dive right into the conversation that I want to have with you tonight. Here's what I want to ask you. Does the fruit in your life match the things that you say that you are? Does that fruit match? Do you have the character and the integrity that upholds who you say that you are? And quite frankly, why is it important that your fruit and your character and your integrity should match? Or does it match? Because here's the thing. If I tell somebody that I'm a believer, if I tell somebody that I'm a son of God, a daughter of God, if you happen to be a female on here, and this is the direction that I'm going in, this is what I live for, shouldn't my life, shouldn't my actions, my words, shouldn't everything in me match with this? This is something that I want to talk to you about tonight. I'm going to tell you why. Because God, when he wants to choose his king while he's dealing with Saul, he sends his man of God, his prophet. Now you have to understand something. This man is his man of God. He sends him to a man's house named Jesse. Jesse happens to be the father of King David. We all know King David if we don't just know David. King David. Now we understand that King David is a young boy. King David has multiple brothers. And while the prophet is at Jesse's home, all of his brothers are paraded in front of him. And God tells the prophet, hey, listen, the ones that you're looking at, they're not the ones. These guys aren't the guys. And then he asks Jesse, do you have yet another son? He said, yeah, it's a boy back here that I do have. But before he asks Jesse this, here's what God tells him. See, I don't look on man's outward appearance. I look on the heart. In other words, who is this person genuinely? That is who God is really after. See, for a lot of us, we can look the part, but not actually be the part. And God says, I'm not interested in outward appearances. I'm interested in heart, right? We know that heart is really the whole of a man, his mind, his will, his emotions, the way he functions, what he does, no matter whether he's in private or in public. And so God says, this is the guy that I'm looking for. We also know the Bible goes on to say that God said David was a man after his own heart. So how important is character, integrity, and fruit in our lives is a discussion that we are going to have tonight. And is it important at all? Let's talk about it.
Man, that is a wonderful, quick introduction to this conversation. Again, so glad that you guys are here with us, man. Raise your questions in the chat, drop them in the chat. We're going to get to them for sure here just shortly. I'm going to do my best to kind of open this up, though, because fruit is actually a pretty interesting thing that I've been locking in on a little bit more in terms of my own teaching and thoughts, just to the aspect of navigating relationships, recovering, healing, transformation, all those kinds of things. And even though PD used the story of David and some Old Testament text that is really, really good. And I think something that we'll touch on. I also kind of want to give a New Testament version of this too, because Jesus kind of talks a lot about this in terms, well, I guess the entirety of the New Testament, but Jesus talks a little bit about this in Mark 11. I have been a big fan of Mark. I think I've mentioned this before, but Mark 11 is a nice little Mark sandwich, man, regarding Jesus encountering a fig tree that wasn't bearing fruit. And then we kind of just seemingly immediately switched to him going to the temple and driving, a lot of exchangers and people from the temple, and ridding of them out of that area. And so, but from that whole story, though, it really got my mind to thinking about how much you can't fake fruit. So when PD's talking about integrity, when he's talking about your character, when he's talking about your confession, when he talks about who you are in your heart, this is actually where a lot of not only who you are is discovered, but also a good teller of who you have the capacity to become later down the line. And it's all based on the things that you're doing now, the person that you're trying to become now, but not just saying I'm trying and not doing anything about it, but actually putting your life in alignment with what you say, with what you believe, with your values. And those things is actually what sets you apart. But what's so interesting about Mark 11 that threw me for a loop, it really did throw me for a loop, is Jesus being mad at a tree that wasn't bearing fruit. Because the first thing that came to my mind was like, well, Jesus, I know you God and everything. And like, you don't make mistakes. And I know you wasn't tripping. But you kind of mad at something that wasn't in season. What are you mad for? I know I'm not supposed to ask questions like that, but I'm just curious. Like, you mad for what? That fig tree wasn't supposed to be there. Figs ain't supposed to be there. That's what you're tripping for. Till I started doing some more study, right? He let me get all that off my chest and said, shut up and keep reading. So I kept reading, right? And what I came to find out was that figs actually have a couple seasons in which they show up. It's not just one season, especially in this terrain, in this environment that they're at. They actually show up in two different spaces. And I'm going to pull up a couple of notes that I ended up taking, which were pretty lengthy in this study. And so I'm gonna just read these off and hopefully we'll come across finishing that thought up. So the seasons seem to happen from about, in our context, American context, from about June to August/October. Okay, like that's kind of the season in which figs and things of that sort kind of come up. So summer to fall. But then also there's some figs that could show up in the springtime. And so depending on obviously the terrain and the environment, it has the capacity to do that. And so figs produce fruit a year after planting. Okay, this is all going to make sense after we read this, because I know this ain't a study on figs, but it'll make sense. And some species of figs only only bear in the fall. Others bear fruit each year. Okay, twice each year, spring and early summer and fall. So there's a type that does both. There's a type that only does one. Okay, so essentially, where there's leaves, figs should follow. That's exactly what Jesus sees on the tree. There's fig leaves. Okay, cool. I'm expecting some kind of fruit to be here, but it's not. That leads to the fig tree being cursed. And it is also said that figs could be found on fig trees during Passover. Okay, so there are other explanations that say it was natural for fig trees to produce at any time during the year. But the main ones were, as we mentioned before. And so whenever a person searches a fig tree for figs to eat, he finds figs in it. As the figs on a tree do not ripe all at once, similarly, and can always find recently ripened figs when it came to matters of the Torah, okay, or maybe the Old Testament in connection to this. So whenever a person meditates upon them, okay, he finds it in new meaning. Okay, so this is actually an idea that came from a commentary that is basically suggesting that the fruit physically, being the fig tree, being the fig fruit, how it shows up, in which it shows up, that it doesn't all ripe at once. And there's fruit that shows up spontaneously throughout its seasons. Likewise, when you take fruit or spiritual fruit, as you're encountering Jesus, you're getting poured in by Jesus, all those kinds of things. Fruit is not to all show up at one time. It is actually something that is spontaneously spread throughout the course of your life as you are connecting to Christ. So you have some fruit in this area. Maybe it's peace and kindness, right? And it's not necessarily suggesting that all of these are separated, but one is stronger than another in a season. When you continue living on, you continue having experiences, all those kinds of things, you start growing in other areas, gentleness, meekness, all those kinds of things, getting more and more of that into you. Okay. So like it is with the Torah, which has no season and bears fruit for anyone who is hungry, so is the fruit tree. That is the basis or the foundation of everything that was just stated there. Okay. Again, hang in here with me because we're going to go somewhere. Okay. So it's fair for Jesus to expect figs on the tree, right? And leaves were only present. And then Jesus curses the tree. So I raised the question, what does the leaves kind of represent then? Right. If that's really what we're talking about, you're mad that fruit wasn't there, only leaves were present. And this goes back to Genesis 3, verse 7. OK, and this is actually something that was really interesting. Adam and Eve sinned. Everybody remembers Genesis chapter 3, the fall. Eve bites of the fruit, shares it with Adam. They're naked and God is asking and seeking where Adam is. Right. What's the first thing that they do? They cover themselves. In fig leaves. OK, fig leaves. This is actually what also allows us to see that it's possible that if it was any fruit that they ate, it was a fig that they may have eaten in the garden. So every time you hear people narrate it was an apple, Veggie Tales, no, I don't think there was an apple. And in a deeper sense, it really doesn't matter what fruit it was, because whatever it was enticing to them to take it. And likewise, when we think of sins that we encounter today, that's dangling fruit that's enticing to us that we at times, many a times, take a bite of and we see what happens. So just a long story short, all of this interweaves throughout the text, and it was a sense of them covering up shame, or in other words, putting on a mask, pretending that they were something they weren't. Okay. In other words, they pretended they weren't naked. They pretended they didn't have their eyes open in any kind of capacity, but clearly they did, because they're doing something they weren't doing previously. They were covered up, whereas before they weren't. So where does this all go? All right. Well, the leaves just simply represent a mask. And what's so interesting about fruit, as I just opened up in the beginning, is that you can't fake it. So if you can't fake fruit, and if fruit is supposed to be something that is legitimately a part of your life, how then can we find ourselves fooled by encountering people or even looking at ourselves and thinking we are something that we aren't? thinking that we're doing something that we truly aren't, or, upholding our values when we truly aren't. And I think all of this comes back to what PD opened up again in the beginning. There's something that isn't aligning between your words, your thoughts, and your actions. And you're saying one thing, and you know how to very well or communicate it very well to get it over to other people who don't really have a peek into your personal life on what actually a lot of the things you're saying looks like in your day-to-day living. It is so easy for us to come out on social media, put a verse of the day in our bio, or, repost a TikTok of somebody preaching and it sounded real good. We have a really good reputation of doing that. But when the phone's put down, when life is carried on behind the scenes, the things when nobody is looking, the life we live when nobody's around, that is something that we just don't fake, because that is actually where we feel safest to be who we genuinely are. And because that is the case, a lot of times we use what is connected here as fig leaves to cover up what it is that we're actually struggling with, what it is that we're actually exposed with, that is actually killing us, not helping us, that is actually hurting us and not being a part of transformation. So the question that I think is really, really important, that we have to really address in this conversation, along with so many other things, is there anything in your life that you are perhaps speaking about, sharing with others, expressing to others, of its importance, of its need, of the level of value that we should uphold such concepts and such ways of living too? But in all actuality, when you really think about it, you yourself aren't aligned in the very things that you're upholding. And you're presenting a lot of fig trees, which is giving people the assumption that you actually do bear fruit. But in reality, there's no fig tree, there's no figs anywhere around you. And likewise, when we connect what Jesus does to this tree, right? Because he curses it, then we come back around, Jesus readjusts it as Peter questions, Lord, there's the tree that you cursed, right? And he kind of goes on to express a lot of things that the temple, or the people in the temple, were supposed to be doing. So the Mark sandwich, it tells a story. And then in the middle of the beginning of this story being explained, there's a full story that Mark just transitions to, that is all simultaneously connected to the story he begins with. He begins with one, he intercepts with a completed story, and then he finishes the story he started. That is what the Mark sandwich is. And so his writing style is very unique there, because he starts with the fig tree, he then transitions to the temple, then he comes back to addressing the fig tree. So what Jesus is essentially getting at is that the same thing that was looking at that tree, bare in fruit, but very, very deceitful in what it could present, is what the people in the temple were moving like. Because, again, money exchangers, all these kinds of things, are running a whole business in the temple. And this is not a reflection of what the Father has established the temple to be. And if we were to take it a step further, because we recognize what the temple is throughout the entirety of the scriptures, if Jesus were to get if others were to get a peek of your actual life and how you cater to your body, how you cater your everyday life, how you cater to all these other things, it is very possible that it is very hollow inwardly, and it's very whitewashed outwardly. Looks real good, but if I take a look at your heart, if I take a look at your mind, if I take a look at the things that you're establishing in your day-to-day living, it's the complete opposite. And so Jesus is addressing all of this in this one Mark sandwich. And I think it's a beautiful picture to just see how we can't take fruit, we can't fake fruit. It is something that is not only progressed in us, but is also something that has to be legitimate inwardly before it's ever exposed and expressed outwardly. And if it's the other way around, it's null and void, and we're in deep trouble. So the question, after this long rant and kind of skimming through some of these notes that I'm sure we'll revisit, is there anything in your life that you can think of right now? I don't know whether you're a believer and you catching this, or you're just somebody who doesn't even know what the heck we're referring to. This question goes to everybody. What do you feel you are currently living or doing that isn't aligned in the things that you say you believe, the values you say you're established to, or the things that you claim you're actually in pursuit of that are near and dear to your heart and mind. What are those things? All of us in some way, shape, or form have something, no matter how small it is, because again, fruit is we don't ever get to the point where we maxed out our fruit levels. We maxed it out and we're perfect, 100 for 100. There's always a progression that's happening there, something that allows us to go deeper, because not only is fruit something that is not only is fruit something that is actually a product, okay, a byproduct of our confession and consistency to Christ. It's also something, and again, not only is it something that's transformational and it's progressing, but oftentimes we're actually hindering ourselves from fruit because of our unwillingness to let go of certain things. So don't just think of it as like, oh, okay, well, I don't got patience, kindness, and joy and peace and all those kinds of things. Yes, that is the fruit of the Spirit, and that's a lot of it. But if we actually went deeper into a lot of those things, consider what are some things that you're holding on to that actually is robbing you of your peace, not helping you keep it. What are some relationships that you're holding on to, some seasons that you're holding on to, some things that have actually expired in your life that it's time to let go? Because Jesus also talks about more fruit in the book of John, where he expresses the need to prune, right, in order to bear more fruit. Well, a season of pruning, I have to release things. I have to let go of things. I have to move forward from things, from people, from seasons, from connections, from maybe places of work, environment, whatever it is. I got to move on from those things if I actually want to bear more fruit in my life that's more meaningful to God than my status, than any money I have in my pocket, anything of that sort. So what are some things that you're potentially not letting go of that is actually hindering you from growth, that is actually hindering you from going through a season of transformation? What are some things that you're not doing? Okay, maybe it's not letting go, but there's some things God is maybe telling you to do and instructing you to do that you're just simply not doing. Something that's been repeatedly on your mind nonstop. You've been in prayer. You've been seeking God. God, I need to know what to do. What have you put in front of me today? What's my purpose, God? I don't know what I'm doing. And yet what's in front of you, you have continuously rejected or continuously refrained from doing. So what is that? What does that look like? Right? This conversation is definitely expansive and exhaustive. I'm sure we won't hit it all, but opening questions that I think is worth considering in the beginning of this conversation, looking at fruit and does it match your confession? So
that was beautiful, man.
Man, that was a lot.
That was a 10 out of 10 PD impression, man. Good stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot. I appreciate you. Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Yeah, man. Just outside of you killing that, I think that kind of the next area I want us to riff on is, what do you think it looks like? Because I hear someone reading, or I can envision someone listening, and they're like, yo, that is kind of convicting me. I don't feel like my fruit matches, what I try to put out there. And some people are maybe even deceiving the world or deceiving themselves, but they don't want to. I feel like sometimes we can get in this place where it's like, yo, I want to be genuine. Like, I want to really do this. Well, especially like with our walk with God, I think sometimes that's something. It's just funny. Like when you hear men, like you just ask them about their spirituality, where they're at, you can just see them freestyling it, like trying to act like their relationship's better than it really is with God. Like they pray more, or, or going to church, or just anything more. Like and I think because there's something that's deep down there, like, yo, I want to, I just don't really know how. Like, I feel like my faith is like an act I have to put on, or I have to kind of overextend, because my camera should come back. But it's like, I don't want people to judge me because it's not a good look to just be like, yeah, I ain't been reading my Bible. I ain't been in church. I ain't even been thinking about God. I just been sinning and doing what I want when I want. So we usually kind of try to posture that up outward. When you hear that, I don't know. What do you think? How would someone go about navigating that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I actually would love your thoughts on your own question too. But I would say this, man, I guess we have to do a really good self-awareness check, man. I'm gonna be honest, because I think again, and I'm gonna say this too, because it's a part of understanding what fruit is. Sometimes we kind of carry this aspect that fruit is something that's just supposed to be downloaded into us, as if like, all right, cool. If I do my prayer and I do my devotional, if I read my Bible a couple times a week, I'm building my fruit. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting it, and I go to church every Sunday. I get my notes. I can repeat what the sermon was. I can get the gist of it, what the biggest takeaway was. I'm growing. That is all a part of it. Don't get me wrong. But I do think we can do all of that and still not locate where we are. And we can do all of that and not actually take the steps necessary after knowing where we are to do better.
Yep.
Like the root of fruit, man, is self-awareness. Because if I don't know who I am, what I'm doing, where am I going, why I'm doing these things, then I won't actually see a need for connecting to Christ in order to get the fruit. You know what I mean? Like he in the same chapter, I believe it's at John 15. He mentions that he's the way, the truth, and life, or maybe that's not John 15, but he does talk about he's the true vine. I'm the true vine. You are the branches, right? And he says this idea, he basically paints this idea that I got to be connected to him in order to bear the right fruit. Otherwise, I'm bearing my own and it rots really fast. It's actually no good. So again, it all stems from me just knowing, okay, the way that I'm living, who I am, is this somebody that I genuinely want to be? Like, and it goes as simple as this. If I want to enjoy a life of purpose, what am I doing today that's actually encouraging that?
Right.
If I say I want to be married, I want to have a family, I want to live the married life in any kind of way, but my current circumstance in life has like literally does not reflect any of that. I'm out here chasing hoes. I'm out here booty calls. I'm out here doing all this kind of stuff, claiming I'm getting all my 20s out and all my fun out. Right. Well, I don't think you should expect a happily married life anytime soon, even if you end up getting in one, so much that you've got to work through just to get to a place of being in peace because of so much baggage you're carrying from the activity that you did previously. And so I think there's got to be a willingness to actually know, okay, well, if I'm shy, if I'm afraid, if I'm a fear of how people are going to view me, if I were to step out and actually admit that I'm struggling in something doesn't make sense to me. It's not even that I'm struggling and that I don't know my value. It's just, bro, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what I'm reading. I don't know what I'm seeing. Or perhaps, man, I don't feel like I'm in an environment where I can actually grow. Like I'm surrounded by a lot of people who don't like the fact that I'm challenging where they are and actually wanting to do better. Like I'm not in a place where people actually want to support the call or the direction on my life. I'm around people who are consistently belittling me and not uplifting me into the things that I believe I'm called to and the places I'm going. So I think with that, we have to really look around and say, all right, well, where am I? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And more importantly, based on all this information, where am I headed? And if I can answer those 4 questions and then compare that to the values that I say I uphold, I want to be a man of honor. I want to be a man of integrity. I want to be a man who his family can trust. I want to be a faithful husband and a faithful father. I want to obviously create businesses or do a lot of good work in the things that have been trusted in me to take care of my family and to lead my family. I want to be a part of the community, whatever things that you might be thinking of. I have to take that and compare there. And that is the starting place. All right. So now that I know where I am and I know where I want to, and I know who I want to be and where I want to go, now, what are the applications that I can start today with what I have to get one step closer every day to that person? If it's Bible reading, all right, well, I got a YouVersion, and maybe I don't got a physical Bible, but I got a YouVersion, and I can listen to a chapter a day. I can read a chapter a day. I can listen to sermons on my workouts, on my way to work, those kinds of things. Maybe it's relationally. Okay. Maybe I just need to revisit my circle. Now that I've established my values, I know where I am and where I'm going and who I'm wanting to be. Does anybody in my circle reflect that? Genuinely, I know we grew up, we went to high school together. We was in middle school together. We have a long history, but does that history hold weight to the person that I'm called to become? Or is it actually something that I need to release and let go? And yeah, it's probably going to bother some people, and it's probably not going to be the funnest conversation. But if I actually value who I want to be and my purpose a lot more, then maybe I got to let that go and I got to just come to terms with it. If it's my health, man, I might need a doctor checkup. I ain't been and seen a doctor in quite a while. I don't know where I'm at. Might need to schedule a doctor's appointment. Maybe it's the economics, man. I need to, what are the goals that I want to do with my money? The best life that I could ever live. What do I want to do with it? What am I doing to earn this income? And now, all right, how can I put myself in one step closer to do that today? Maybe I need to create a budget, something small as that, because my spending is crazy, right? Like simple applications, man, that I think is actually going to put you in a position to get closer to that life. And more importantly, living it abundantly. But I think it all starts with recognizing where I am and then being able to, as a result, not just knowingly know that I'm a narcissist, I'm selfish, I'm egotistical, I'm no good, like not just knowingly knowing that, but actually then allowing that to take me to a place of repentance and connecting to Jesus. Because that, I think, is where all of that ultimately starts and finishes. So that might be where I would start. It's a lot, but that just knowing where I am, I think that's huge. What would your thoughts be?
Man, not much after that. You said that's a start. I thought that was a masterclass. I thought that was said beautifully.
Yeah.
Kane had a comment, and I feel like he gave the great blanket statement of it, and you colored it in with a lot of details, because Kane was like, I think I fit that description to a degree. And for someone that might have just tuned in, that description is someone that wants to do better, especially in their faith, but they almost feel a need to fake the funk a little bit, not be completely true to who they are. And they're still living very selfishly, but maybe putting out there that they're doing things for God, like they were doing in the temple that Great highlighted. But so he says, I think I fit that description to a degree. I think honesty is the best policy, and then taking it one actionable step at a time instead of trying to do everything at once, which I think is essentially what you were saying. Shout out to MVP. C just popped in on YouTube, man. What's going on, brother? Shout out to welcome to our weekly Bible study. Yeah, I think you broke down just being mindful. Maybe to color that in some more, I would say I love meditation, y'all. Meditation, it doesn't have to be any weird stuff. Don't got to cross your legs or hum. Just take something that you're thinking through. Let's say, you're trying to understand. I thought Rape did a good job of saying, you got to know where the fluff you're at, what you want. I think sometimes our life can look like a mess of jumbled wires everywhere, and we don't know what's going on, why it's going on. We're just reacting. We're pulling at things. And I think if we can take the time inside of our mind and comb through and kind of organize our thoughts, why we want what we want, why we're doing the things that we're doing, why we're around the people that we're around, and not from a place of, ego of what are people going to think. You got to be genuinely true with yourself, be real. And once you know that, you can start to make, kind of think cable management. Once you can clean your thoughts out a little bit, well, then you can see what's really going on. Okay, this is the problem. I can adjust here, do that. And as process and ways of getting that clarity, I like to use the mindful exercises like meditation. So just, you're working through a problem, sit down, set a timer, 10, 15 minutes, and just think. And guess what happens? You're going to get distracted. A thought's going to come up, going to take you to the side. Just gently bring it back and keep thinking on it. You'll notice you guys rarely probably meditate on things in the positive sense. You're probably really good at meditating on things negatively, because think about it. You'll do it in the reverse. You'll just be harping over what's going to go on, what's going to go wrong, all the different scenarios. Then you'll hop into visualizing it and making it vivid. Your heart will start racing. And then your heart will start racing, and then you might get distracted for a little bit by a TikTok, and then you're happy. But then what do? Just gently bring your attention back to the worry and the negativity and over time that wears on you. I think meditation is just the reverse, in the sense that we're talking about it. I just think you can just meditate on some of the more negative things, but the Bible, I think it's Psalms 1 talks about blessed is a man that meditates on God's law day and night. So that's what we're doing, right? That's how you're meditating on it day and night, and not just meditating on scripture and memorizing that. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying the scripture has a means to an end. Like, it's not supposed to be a magical chant that you just throw at situations. You're supposed to think differently about things and actually like start acting different. And so meditating on God's law day and night would be like, before we knew what gravity was, it would be like us just looking around, be like, yo, I jumped off that 2-story building, broke my mother fluffing leg. What is going on? And it seems like every time I jump, I come back down. And so it's like you're meditating and thinking about you in relationship to that law and how it works and how it's navigating in your life. And the same thing with God's law. You're like, yo, I was moving with love and patience in this situation, and it didn't change quickly. But over time, I got a better effect. And then there was a similar situation where I was rude and angry, and I kind of did get my way on the front end, but it didn't really work out on the back end. And so I should probably stop doing the latter and maybe just do the stuff that God was saying. Like, that's what the meditating on it looks like. And now, and you have so much information. You're interacting with people. You have thoughts. You have desires. And so it's saying meditate on that. And so, yeah, meditation is one of those tools. Another one I highly recommend is journaling. The best way, my new favorite way to journal is with the feelings wheel. Like, you go and grab you can just Google feelings wheel, or you can get apps on the app store. And it has a lot. It's like or some of them will call them emotional wheels. And it's just different ways to describe how you're feeling. And there's so many layers to it. Some of us were just only equipped to talk about how we feel in the sense of being sad, or maybe you say I'm pissed off. But there's deeper ways of looking at that. You know, maybe you feel betrayed, and that's why you're actually mad. And we can look at that with a little bit of a nuance, and that helps give us understanding. And so the more you look at these feelings wheels, it'll give you more labels and more words to put to how you feel instead of just mad. You can navigate that. And then kind of take those feelings and try to understand them in the moment, but then just write what you got going on. You could just do it spam strategy. Just, fluff her mama, fluff everything she stand for, and just get it out there. And then you can kind of see it in front of you. It helps you see that you aren't your thoughts. You aren't those emotions. There are things you have, but you aren't them. Or you can do it just, sometimes I do bullet journaling. So it's just real bullet points. It's not really thought out or not too extensive. I'm trying to be short and concise, but that requires me to think through things a little bit more. So I'm not just like, word vomit. It's like, nah. So I wouldn't just say like, maybe vomit on how this call went and everything that I felt. I might try to think about it and summarize like a takeaway from the time I spent through Truth Project, and leave a bullet or two from that, and then move on. And so you can do that throughout your day. I think the best way to do it, a nice little rhythm, would be to wake up, journal how you feel immediately. Midday, set an alarm to do the same things, kind of like a check-in, like, yo, how's my day going? And at the end, a review. And you'll notice there's like the best thing, and you'll notice the more you do it, you'll notice that there's more of just an even kill throughout your day. Like that first, that middle, and that second one, you're pretty much in the same spot. If you're going through a tough season or you're very chaotic, maybe those jumbled wires I talked about, you might notice you might wake up feeling amazing. Then at lunch, you're pissed off. You ready to shoot up the whole workplace. And then after you watch Netflix, you're kind of good again, right? And and the beauty of that is you may not have like a chart or a graph to see it, but you can loosely kind of see if you just go through the journals or review your meditations, you'll see like, yeah, I've been all over the place this week. And then you can kind of feel it once you mature, because you're like, yeah, I was happy in the middle of the day. I'm kind of still happy at night. Dang, I was happy in the morning too. And so I try it, y'all. It sounds like work, but once you do it, it's actually super beneficial. But yeah, that's the only thing I'd add. I thought you killed it though.
No, yeah, I think that was beautiful. I think as I'm kind of going through the notes too, I think there's three other thoughts or applications that I would add to this. But before that, mentioning the fruit back in the text that I kind of started with, the problem that many people would associate with it is that, the tree was cursed because there was the figs were absent, right? And I think what I'm about to say is going to be actually a huge difference, because although that is true, we're missing why it's absent. And the biggest part of why it's absent is because the leaves are pretending as if the figs are present. Like that. So there's a pretense issue instead of, well, there's just no figs here. There's absolutely no fruit. No. It's actually saying that there was a fakeness that was showing there. And so what Cain addresses, and I don't necessarily want to feel I'm repeating myself here, but what Cain addresses, like, honesty is the best policy. Absolutely. How you rid of fakeness in your life is by being real. Like, straight up. I have to put words to what I feel, to what I know, to what I have to be honest there. It's quite a delulu factor if I expect other people to be honest with me, but I'm not honest with myself. In fact, I would go as far as to say this. I may have said this before. I actually agree when Tim Ross says moral failures, most, if not all moral failures, are because somebody didn't talk. Somebody somewhere did not express what they were feeling, what they were thinking to somebody that they could trust that would actually help them revert from what they were going to do as a result and actually turn away and turn to the other side. He said something earlier that I would also mention as well. What doesn't come up and out of your mouth will come up and out of your body through actions.
Oh man, that's fire.
That right there, I had to quote
fire.
it. That I had to quote it because I'm gonna keep sitting on it, and I'm gonna have some thoughts on it too. But what doesn't come up and out of your mouth through words will come up and out of your body through actions. That is a huge deal. We go back to David. PD opened up with David, right? David, obviously, we get the whole pretense. He's where he's not supposed to be. He's on flat rooftops, all these kinds of things. How much different would David's story look like if he were to have just not used his position and status as a measuring stick to abuse, but to actually say, yo, she bad, and don't let me back on this rooftop for the rest of the day. Cause I don't need that. And a part of Bathsheba's perspective, and just for a little more context, she's not out there just butt naked, swinging on chandeliers, wanting to be seen. Like, she's actually doing a cleansing, because in the Old Testament, a woman who was on her period was considered unclean. And so they had to go through a ritual cleansing in order to be a part of the community again. So she was doing something that was requested or demanded, if you will, by law. So it wasn't like she was just out there wanting to be seen. And so it was David who was out of position, out of pocket, and then decided to use his position and status as a tool to get what he wanted. And I think, coming back to the perspective of fruit, perhaps what God is asking of you, to those of you who are like, yo, I'm a little bit ashamed. I don't really want to, admit that I'm either struggling here or that I don't get this here, or, you know what, man, I just feel so behind, yo. I just feel so behind compared to my counterparts. And I don't want to admit that there's some reasons I know of and some reasons I don't know of as to why I'm behind. I don't want to admit that I need help. I don't want to admit all these kinds of things. You know what all that speaks to? You are more willing to hold on to your status than you are to obedience. And that is a struggle that we have to be willing to engage with in order to actually see transformation. Perhaps Jesus is asking of the Pharisees, whom he loves yet cleans out of that temple, to let go of your status and stuff in order to receive fruit that is actually more beneficial for your life. Maybe, just maybe, that is what we have to be willing to engage with and let go of. And so, yeah, honesty is the best policy. And I don't think you go anywhere without it. And I remember I had to work on that too, man. I remember I was actually just having a conversation with my pops, man, this past weekend. We had a really good conversation. And I was just kind of, sharing with him some of my perspectives of my parents throughout my childhood and growing up, as we were having some of that. And I was like, man, you know the saying, When you're a kid, you idolize your parents. When you're in your teens, you demonize them. But when you're older, in your 20s and older and up, you humanize them. There's a lot of understanding behind it. And I was like, man, there was a lot in me because of the rejection that was built up in me from how many times I was told no, because I didn't feel like I could go places and do what I wanted to do. Because of that fear of rejection that ultimately built up in me, that's how I became a homebody. Not only is that how I became a homebody, but that's also how I felt I needed to lie to go do what I wanted to do. So there were so many times where I was losing integrity points because I was saying I was going one place, knowing I was going somewhere else, but feeling like if I told the truth, I'm not going to be able to go. And that all was convincing stories right in my head because of past experiences that now, being honest, and as I was going through this earlier in my life, having to be honest, I really didn't need to go to those places. I wanted to, but I really didn't have any business going there. Like there wasn't anything there for me to do. I'm telling you, if I didn't have such, maybe protection in my life throughout that, so many guardrails in my life due to so many things that's happened in my family, from people just not being wise and making good choices. I don't know. I'm not saying I wouldn't be here, but I don't know. I don't know, man. I could have a little Sean walking around here, and that is not good for anybody. Okay. Anybody. So I'm just saying, man, like there was so much I learned from that, in that space, but I had to grow in being an integral individual. Doing the Man Enough Challenge. I want to shout out the Man Enough Challenge for a second. I ain't getting paid for it. It's all for the free. The Man Enough Challenge, man, was an area where I committed to being integral, because I could have easily came into that community and said every day that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. But I had a couple resets. So I had a choice. And trust me when I tell you, when I laid my head down, when I was late to bed, I was like, man, shoot. I was like, man, I think I wrote 11:50 that I was going to go to bed. It's 11:40. I think I wrote 11:50. I just was like, man, I was already barely making points. I needed this one to go to the next one. And I was just writing. I was like, boy, I just show hope. I was stressing. Woke up the next morning. I did not put that in my power down. I missed my bedtime. So I had an opportunity. I had a choice here. And even as small as this is, maybe insignificant to other people. And I think that is something that we should be aware of as we're trying to grow in fruit, right? Because even the small things matter. Because if you do it here, you're going to do it in areas where your integrity is really going to need to be called into play. That's all I could think about. Like, where does the buck stop? I had to keep asking myself that. Where does the buck stop with you, dude? Because if you do it here, who knows if you get caught up in some in scandalous stuff, God forbid, later on in life when you're married and all that kind of stuff. Like we know you're going to feel like you need to do it there. But if you practice it here in the small steps, it's what's going to build that integrity for you to be honest there too, to have all passwords access to. You don't got nothing to hide. I'm chilling. You don't got to worry about me stepping out. I'm good. I know what I got. And so I came in there. You know what? I had to reset. Did not feel good at all. But I walked through that. And it was so much better to restart there than it is to get somewhere else on a major platform and fall. And if I'm being honest, man, there's so much going on in the Christian faith. If y'all have not paid attention over the last couple of weeks, so much from leaders falling and pastors stepping down and all these kinds of things happening. I'm telling you, that integrity thing matters even now. And you have no idea where God may take you, where you will be put on platforms pouring into people, man, being a part of so much transformation. But I think in a lot of ways, the enemy wants to give you that platform even more, because it's what it's because it's what's going to encourage you to feel like the platform is the void to cover what you're really dealing with. That's really going to be the fall, and he'll let you have it. I'll give you the world as long as you serve me. That is kind of some of that stuff behind it, man. And so that integrity piece is real. Three quick applications from it I had just found. One is being honest. Have already covered that. I got to put actions to words. We've kind of really covered that too. Honor others with my actions. Look to live out daily what I coach and teach. Right. This is just for me. Applications. This is a big thing when it comes to reading scripture too, y'all. Like, it's easy to think about how this could affect others. When you ask the questions, how does this impact me where I'm at? What do I need to work on? And then thirdly, the essentials, man, a prayer life, walking in forgiveness, and standing firm in the faith with boldness, man. Like those things all play a role when it comes to multiplying fruit in your life. And so just those three things. But yeah, it's huge. And I hope we elaborated on that enough.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, that was good. A quick question from my guy MVP over on YouTube. He was asking, he said, what are the best ways to study the Bible? I've been trying to get into reading more, but I don't know where to start. So I'll give my quick recommendation, and I linked him to the Faith Factory. If anyone else looking for that, let us know. If you're on YouTube, you can just check that link. It's not exclusive to him. Anyone can get that, but it's just a resource of a bunch of links to different like faith related topics. We have, let me actually open it. We have links to what?
And a lot of things, resources, playlists, influencers that you can follow and just flood your social medias with.
Books,
YouTube channels, books,
websites, YouTube
resources.
Channels, yeah. Because a lot of you guys, if you're being honest, man, a lot of things that are influencing you are the people you're following, the stuff that you're watching, and that social media, as soon as you open it, it's programming you a little bit. And so we wanted to give you a bunch of people so that you could go follow some Christian pages, follow some faith-based YouTube channels, get that stuff in your recommendation, start consuming it. But yeah, Twitter, there's podcasts, a couple apps on there. You struggle with listening to like some music that you know might not be good. You feeling the urge to start pimping hoes and selling crack because all the music you listen to. We got some playlists of some Christian music that isn't whack, even just some artists you can go search. So very useful thing there. And then it has a video at the top where I break down my recommended Bible reading plan. Again, there's no one size fits all. Have been people that have not recommended or did not go this path. They still made it to heaven. They still got good understanding of the Bible. When my first time reading the Bible was not like this, maybe the same for Great, but I like to start in the book of John, because we are in what is called the Gospels, and this is going to give you a story about Jesus. It's not one of the longer ones, not a whole lot of details, so you can get in, get out, understand what this whole faith is around in terms of the person of Jesus, and you just keep reading. You just keep reading straight from the Bible until you get to the end. There's a chapter or a book called Revelation. I usually recommend skipping that, and then you start at the beginning of the Bible and then just read back to John. And for that, you're going to get the whole New Testament, or not the whole, but we're going to get it starting with Jesus. Then you get to learn about the early church and how it got started, some of the crazy things they went through. And then you'll get letters from some of the early church fathers, basically just breaking down the thought process, the way that we move, the way that we think, and you can get an understanding there. And then you read the Old Testament, which was a lot of Old Testament has a lot of stories, man. You're going to read some things that challenge things you've ever believed. On the first couple of pages, there's going to be a snake talking to you. As Americans, we're not too tripping off that. We've just heard Adam and Eve so much, but trust me, it gets weird, man. People think that the Bible is just a list of rules and guidelines that you have to follow, and you'll just read a little bit. You'll be like, oh, this really isn't how this is put together. And in the Old Testament, you'll see a lot more poetry, and there's stories. There's a lot. There's a lot of different writing styles in the Bible. And so I like people starting on the New Testament. It's a little easier to digest. Then you have the principles and the understandings that are being walked out in more of the Old Testament. But there are many ways to skin a cat. And so, Grape, if you got that question, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not honestly too much different. In terms of like actually the reading portion of it, I would suggest New Living Translation. It's a really good translation to look at to start with. It just keeps things really simplified. You don't got to be tripping over the here art thous and all these other different languages that don't nobody speak in today's culture. But it's really, really beneficial there. And I think there's a time and a place to begin, implementing methods as you go along. The more that you read, the more that you're going to be wanting to kind of pull things out the text a certain way. One of the things I've been doing recently, and it's actually more for like deep diving study. I think the basis of what I'm about to say is just to make time for it. Make time for it, man. Yes, you can get a chapter in 5, maybe 10 minutes. Anybody can do that. There's literally absolutely no excuse to not get a chapter a day in. But I just really encourage you to make time for it, because I think what I've learned in my relationship personally is just the more that I have made time to sit with him, the more stuff just unfolds. And I remember, I mean, there's countless times, and again, it's just where I'm at, not saying that this is where you need to be, but I've had many a times where I've made enough time for it to where I was in the New Testament, I was reading something, and I was like, hold on. I traveled back to the OT. I was in Genesis to end my study. I didn't start there. My notebook was filled out because of so much stuff that, again, just when it's like when you have a conversation with somebody, man, that you love and care for, you sit down with them long enough and you'll hit on a conversation on a topic, and you'll learn more about them. They'll learn more about you. And it just gets deeper and deeper and better and better. And so just make time for it is the biggest thing that I can encourage. The SMART method, I think Alan Parr actually showed me this. He had a little Bible course that he did that I actually clicked on just to watch through, and I ended up taking it, and it ain't left. It's been really dope. So first you see it. So you're basically looking for the bigger picture behind the message, behind the chapter. What is the bigger message and the overall theme of the Bible? Of course, if you're new to it, you're not going to think of that. So just something to keep for future references. And then you have mark it. Okay, so this is where you're just coming and you're approaching the text with questions. You just want to bombard it with questions. What does this mean? You're circling words you've never seen, maybe repetitive words. You're looking for connectors, conjunctions. You're looking for questions. You're looking for all those kinds of things. That just helps you become more and more a student of the word. And then you have analyze it. This is where you're just looking for context. You're looking for cultural context. You're looking for geographical and historical context. And then you're looking for commentaries. Okay, so that's a good place to do that as well. Just again, expand your study. And then you have reflect it. And that's where you're just asking, what does this mean to me? And where I'm at. And then you have finally teach it. I think there is a really huge blessing in getting a conversation from God. And it can literally be a moral duty. At least for me, I treat it as a moral duty. When he shares that with me and it's in a depth, I got to find time to share it. I haven't always done it. I haven't always been the best at it, and I'm committing to doing so. But yeah, when he gives me some word and some thought like that, no matter how many notes I take, it's up to me. I got to find a way to condense it, make it make sense. But regardless, it's a moral duty, man, to share that stuff. And so you teach it, and it can be a blessing to whoever you encounter. And so again, don't necessarily take that and run with it immediately if you're not ready for it. It's something to look forward to. Bible Project is really good too. Bible Project, you watch those before you read a chapter or anything like that. Really cool stuff. I was hating on them for a little bit because they was spoiling it for me. But I got along, and then finding out Tim Mackey, that brother, that brother's special. So yeah, that's about all I got on it though. Definitely check out the Faith Factory. That has been a really good resource. I've shared with a lot of other people and they've gotten some help from it. So
I love it. So this is the last call for questions. And so if you have them, get them in. In that, my guy MVP asks how to overcome temptation. That's my biggest boundary between me getting close with God. I feel that, man. I think we'd all be as fruitful if we want if it wasn't for the dang temptations, man. The temptation. So I'll warm it up. Great, please come in, give your thoughts.
Yeah.
But so I actually have something that I teach. I like to call the doorway of desire. I just want you to think of like you being tempted as something, first off, that's internal. So it's not on the outside. Now, that's how we talk about it, to say like, hey, this woman tempted me or this website tempted me. But what's really going on is it's almost like a flashlight searching you on the inside for anything to grab and to hook on to. And if there is any temptation going, that's because of the reflection of you on the inside, not the thing. And so it's not like, hold on 2 seconds. I think I got a knock on my door.
Yeah. That's I think where he going with that, that's a really good deep thought right there.
Okay. Yeah. My bad. So yes, it's not that this woman is tempting, because if she was, she'd be tempting to everybody, right? Every single person that would see them would just fall in lust or whatever. Just that's like saying a show is good. Yeah, a show might be good to you. That's because you think it's good, but every person who watches that show doesn't think that it's good. And so it's more about how it's reflecting off of you on the inside. And that's important to note, because that's the whole point of temptation. It's to show you and reveal to you areas that you need to work on. Now, to even have temptation, you got to have a goal, something you're aspiring, like something you're trying to hit. So for us, it's usually like character. That's Christ. Like, we want to act this way. We're aspiring up towards something. So if you're even tempted, that's good, because, you might be tempted to cheat on someone. All right. Like when you're in a relationship, that means you're like, I shouldn't, you have that dance. The person that just be cheating, they not even tempted. They just go. They just like, right? Because they're not aspiring to not be a cheater, right? And so that's a good thing if you're being tempted, first off, and then understand that it's something that's internal. And then I feel like temptation happens in 5 steps. And it's going to be a lot. I narrowed it down to 1 word for each step. So if you're taking notes, I would write this really quick. If you got to just write it in the chat as I'm listening, copy it, throw it in your notepad afterwards. But so I want you to think of temptation starting with a glance. All right. That's the first step. That's when, and this doesn't have to be actually a physical, like with your eyes glance. This could be a thought. So maybe you're just chilling and the thought is like, yo, let me pop up that laptop real quick, grab the lotion and go on that website. I know I shouldn't. That's the glance, that moment where you have a thought. At that point, you haven't sinned, you haven't done anything wrong, and you honestly aren't separate from any, like the men of highest character, okay, have glances. Whether it's thoughts or they're walking down the mall. I promise you, they see the big booty. It's not like they reach a level of spirituality where God like changes their hood. So like they're looking through their eyes and it's like all booties are filtered. No, like booty, breastises, they're just living life. Boom, booty can be there. And if it stays at a glance and you just gently move back to whatever you were doing, no harm, no foul. And that's where I want you guys to really start practicing. And you'll notice the more you do that and you do some more of the internal work. I love the Grape shouted out the Man Enough Challenge. If you guys go to manenoughchallenge.com, that's a free challenge we have for you guys. It's 16 weeks. It is powerful. It will help you be man enough spiritually. But if you're doing stuff like that, reading the Bible with the plan we gave you, you'll notice that those glances they're not going to be as powerful. Okay. And you'll start to see things for what they are. And trust me, brother, like God is trying to get you to a place of understanding with the temptations, not to be like, oh, don't look at women like that. That's bad. Don't look at porn. That's bad. And you're just like, all right, I'm not going to do it. And so, because God said so. God is trying to change your whole view of reality so that when you look at that woman, you're like, I see you as a woman made in the image of God and not something that exists to serve me sexually. And so that same woman is there, the same breasts are there, the same booty is there, but the interpretation is different, right? It's not that, all right, I'm going to see this and I'm going to go beat my meat now. It's like, no, I understand why this is happening. Well, one, if you are tempted, but hopefully you start to understand that. But the goal, I genuinely believe God is trying to help you transcend that and actually understand, like I said, see things differently, not just you got so good of holding things in so that you don't get in trouble. That's not the life he's trying to have you live. And so but you want to practice on just not letting things go past a glance. Okay. The next thing is the chance. So step 1, glance. Step 2, chance. That's when you see the booty and it's not just a gentle move back to whatever you're doing. You start to think, you even start to consider like, yo, could this booty exist to serve me? Now, I'm not saying like actually going in and, you know, wanting to have sex with her or smack the booty. I'm saying you even start to sexualize it a little bit. Because yes, there is a fact in the universe that booty exists, but it's not your booty, okay? And it wasn't created for you to, that's not its purpose, and that's not why it exists. And so our mind shouldn't even be going there. But it doesn't have to even be booty, right? It can be tempted to cuss someone out at work. And it's the same thing. It starts at a glance. It's like, what the fluff did you just say to me? Right? I'm not saying you maybe even say that, but it's that when you notice like, oh, I'm offended as fluff right now. You get a chance to, now you move into that chance phase. Like you start to wrestle with like, yo, am I going to take this offense? Am I going to look at this? Am I going to put my selfish goggles on and make this all about me? All right. And once you start to even do that, though, and look at things selfishly, just know you've crossed the line and you're starting to walk into sin. And then once you have the glance, you go to chance, then you go stance. All right. This is when you've officially and you got to be careful. Some of you guys just think the temptation happens like that. And the more you give in to the same temptation, so the more you've been beating your meat, these steps happen faster and you're so desensitized. You might have to go back to some of the earlier times where you remembered like, yo, no, this was the step I took. And you still take them every time the temptation shows up. It's just much faster probably for you. But then you make a stance and you're like, yes, all right, cool. I'm officially pissed off. I'm about to crash out, I think, as the young guns say now, or yeah, no, I'm staring, I'm locked in, and I'm watching the booty jiggle. All right. That's the stance phase. Then the advance is where you really start to mull it over in your mind. You start to make plans. And I just want to give you the last step too, because then it kind of helps give it context. And the last step, step 5 is trance. So you've gone from just a glance, you started to give it a chance, play with it in your head. Then you'd make a stance on it. You're like, all right, this is the way I'm moving. And then you start to advance it. Maybe it's with maybe I can think of another. Can you think of another temptation off the top? I don't know why I went to straight sex and violence.
Well, I mean, that's definitely where it's at. But, you know,
food,
money,
maybe food. Okay.
greed.
Maybe, yeah. Money, greed. Yeah. Like these are things maybe you're trying to manage your money better, or you're supposed to be on a diet, right? This is when you're scrolling that DoorDash app and you know dang well you shouldn't even be on there. You just constantly, this is when the meditation is kicking in, right? This is when King David was like, so he made the stance like, yep, Bathsheba's mine. Then he starts making the plans for it. All right, this is that advanced level of temptation where you're moving it forward. And then with each step, it gets harder. When you have a glance, you have an easy fight. The human will, boom, knock that out. And some of y'all know the more you advance these things, and science will even tell you, then the logic centers in your brain start to shut down. You just horny. You like, nah, I'm gonna beat this meat, or I'm gonna knock this ninja out, or I'm about to buy this stuff on Amazon. Rent's due, whatever it may be. I'm gonna grab those cookies, and it's almost like you're not even in control. It's 3 a.m. You just ate the whole Oreos, and you're just like, how did I get here? And so I think it's important to understand those levels of temptation. That'll help you navigate the actual moment so much better. But then please understand everything I said on the front end. Like, it's all just shining lights on character issues for you, not to bully you, not to say that you're bad, to show you what's in between what you're aspiring to hit and where you're at now. So you're like, yo, I'm aspiring to have this peace, this gentleness. I'm trying to this mind of Christ. Great. Because you're trying to hit that, temptation shows up to point everything out. And so don't get caught up. Don't get distraught. Don't think God hates you. See it for what it is and work on those things. Now you know the things to be mindful of, to bring the meditation to journal about, to really try to understand. And once those are gone, the temptation can't get you. It can't cling to you, right? Like, there's just certain things, like some of you men in here, you know other men that are tempted by ding-a-ling. Are you? Are you? You like, nah, brother. Nah, not once. Okay, because there's nothing in there for it to grasp on, right? That's why you was not tempted in your locker rooms, right? You played sports, you played basketball. You was there to do what you had to do. And there was no temptation because there wasn't none of that in you. And hopefully that just helps you understand it a little bit better and gives you the tools to navigate it. My bad, a little bit of a TED talk, but
man, that was fire.
Lead on that.
I mean, I think I might. I don't think there's much to add, to be honest. I think you killed that. He did come back and ask, "How do I stop the temptation? What's the best practice to do?" I think you definitely hinted at that throughout your response. But if I were to reiterate any of it, I would say, I think this is something I'll say in a phrase and then explain it. Chaos that is revealed on the surface is actually revealing chaos that's happening inwardly. And it's not exactly how I had it, but it's just off the top. So what I would say to that is typically when you, and I'm gonna connect it here, but when you typically find people who are pushing you, pain is pushing them. And it's important, just like how we would look at other people for all their mistakes and temptations they fall into that they eventually get exposed on at major platforms. It's easy for us to look at them and go, how nasty, how foul. And sir, you need to be eliminated from humanity. This is not it. But at the same time, we failed to turn a mirror on ourselves and see that we are in other ways, maybe not exactly in that manner, but in other ways are just as foul and can be. And so I say all that because the root is actually the bigger issue, not the fruit. The root is the bigger issue. And so we have to ask ourselves why. If you ask me, all right, and you might be new here, MVP, I've talked about this on numerous occasions. It's just a part of my testimony. Your boy had a pornography stronghold on my life, man, for years, through middle school, high school, even early college. Okay. How I ended up making the best efforts to separate from that, along with ultimately being in connection to Christ and continuing to foster that relationship. Because I think oftentimes we try to figure out how to stop doing something, when in reality, I need to be connected to Jesus. And the more I spend time with him, the more I'm going to get poured in by truth and what's right. And the more that's going to get poured into me, the more the stuff that I'm struggling with is going to spill out of me, because I'm just getting more and more understanding behind why partaking in those things aren't what's beneficial for me in the life I'm called to live. I'll leave that there. How I deal with this applicably is asking myself why this is even enticing to deal with. If it's pornography, if it's to the furthest extents of pornography. Okay. I mean, there's people that are struggling with, molestation, people that are struggling with, pedophilia, people that are struggling with all kinds of things. Okay. I mean, left, right, in between. Whatever your struggle is, whatever the temptation is, you have to ask yourself why, because the why is going to reveal the bigger story behind why that even looks enticing. Because truth is, and you don't have to go to therapy to discover this. You don't have to necessarily do coaching and counseling to discover this. You just need to ask why. Why am I so willing and wanting to schedule on my calendar a beat meet session at midnight? Why am I looking forward to this so much? Right? And it ought to lead you to other questions. Well, what happened earlier in my day that pushed me to there? Was I rejected? And like how I was talked to, somebody did something that reminded me of a pain that I have yet to really address. What is it? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I anticipating? What's up? Right? And just continue growing curious. Because you know what's so interesting is a lot of times people find themselves frustrated at other people's sins, poor decisions, and mistakes. And sometimes, I'm not saying every time this is the case, but sometimes it actually is revealing an issue that they're having within themselves, which is exactly what points to Dion's deal about how it shines a light on you. When you find yourself tempted on something, it's actually shining a light on what is a character issue in you. And so I would say you have to really ask yourself why. Why am I feeling this way? What is the story behind this temptation? And then now that I have awareness of where this is coming from, right? Because truth be told, I'm not really wanting to go to the pornography as much as I think I am. It's actually just me being extremely lonely tonight. And I'm extremely angry. And I'm extremely depressed. Let's talk about that too, right? I'm anxious. Okay. You know what? I'm actually trying my hardest to suppress something that happened to me 10 plus years ago that I honestly, for a lot of reasons, haven't dealt with. There's been a lot of shame. There's been a lot of issues. So I'm just trying to do anything I can to numb what happened to me from years past. See, there's so much behind the surfaced action that's happening, the stories that you're telling yourself behind it, that's actually encouraging you to do that. And so, yeah, the 16-week challenge, the Man Enough challenge, actually, I sent it in the YouTube chat, MVP. Coach Sean Walker is the name. If you take that link, just highlight it, copy and paste it into your search bar or onto your notes, it should actually turn into a link. And there you can have it, the 16-week challenge. That will definitely be helpful. And I think that is, on its own right, man, just helps you understand better where those things come from. So hopefully that answers your question. You really have to ask yourself why. This could actually look in the basis of things, journal it out. Right. So I've told clients before who have struggled in spaces of pornography and things like that. Hey, I think, as we continue trying to transition out of this, what would be beneficial is when you are in the midst of the temptation, when it's at its hottest. You really want to be able to just pause for a second, ask yourself a few questions. And I think the more you ask them, the more it's going to be harder for you to continue going through with it. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is anything going to change? And this may not be exactly how I put it to him, but these are also questions to ask. Is there anything that is going to change as a means to me doing and participating in this action? So the real thing that I'm mad about, the real thing that I'm upset about, frustrated about, I feel separated about, I feel depressed about, I feel anxious about, I feel angry, whatever it is me participating in this very action that I'm tempted to do going to change anything about this? Matter of fact, here's a better one that might help, because you might say to yourself, well, yeah, I won't be sad about it anymore. Okay. Are you at the end of you doing this, right? At the end of you participating in this temptation, whatever it is, are you actually getting the result that you're hoping to get? And I have proof that you probably aren't, because you have to come back to it the very next time that emotion shows up. That's why it's temporary, right? Like, that's why the temptation hits a peak before it passes sometimes. Like you were really fighting for a night, and you got to put your phone to the side, or whether, you fighting yourself not to go downstairs and get a snack. But eventually that temptation passes. Why does it pass? Because it's temporary. It's not something that's supposed to be there forever. And it's something in a lot of ways that your body is programmed to do after you've been doing it for so long. And so it explains your body keeping score. It explains all these different things that your body is doing as a response to the temptation you're used to participating in. And the temptations change majority of the time. A lot of times as you go through seasons of life, your temptations shift. So as long as you're willing to do the work and the temptations you have today, please don't think that you won't have temptations anymore. The question of how do I overcome temptation sometimes rings a bell in me that and I'm not saying this is you, MVP, but when I hear this question, I think about others who are like, yeah, I'm trying to defeat the game of temptation forever. Like, I don't ever want to deal with temptation again, because I think it's what's hindering me. If I'm being honest, and this actually is more towards you, MVP, and others, and this isn't, of course, to call you out or cook you or anything like that, but just hear my heart on this. It actually may just be you struggling with an identity or a willingness to continue pursuing God in the midst of your temptation. There is a theological disconnect between who God really is and who you may be assuming God is thinking of you as based on you participating on the temptation, that could be keeping you from continuing to come to God, even when you participate in the temptation, after you participated in the temptation, and while you're thinking of the temptation before you participate in it. Because what's actually interesting is God's grace makes room for us to enter into his presence, even in the midst of the height of a temptation and all the thoughts that we're having. And God is not actually looking at us and, as Dion mentioned, slapping us on the wrist, telling us not to do. God actually makes room for us to be transformed in his presence and allow us to really work through those temptations. I can't tell you how many times I have been tempted. Pornography, for example, man, I remember I had stopped watching that stuff for a while, but a lot of the graphics were stained in my mind. Like that stuff would just pop up in my mind at the forefront of my brain while I'm playing Madden. Like I'm just playing Madden and I just boom, I see it just raw. It's crazy. I'm like, whoa, my body is reacting to it because it actually thinks I'm now watching it in some way because it's programmed there. And so I had to literally, man, in the middle of it, turn on worship music and step away, go for a walk, get out the environment, get into a space, man, where I'm actually just trying my hardest to connect with God in that space. And it's not that it was impossible, so I was fighting against it. It's just more like I'm doing the best I can to transition my mind from this level of thinking of what I'm seeing in my brain from what was stained to getting into a place of peace and restructuring my thinking in that space. Man, God welcomes all of that. And so I think sometimes when we're thinking I need to overcome temptation and that's the biggest thing or the biggest block to me getting close to God, actually, man, I think it's how we're viewing God in the midst of our temptation that's keeping us from there. Because God isn't the one that's like, hey, you can't come to me until you deal with this temptation. And my presence is not available to you until you deal with this. Nah, it's available to you the whole way. You have the same access to God when that temptation was at its highest and when you committed it than before it, and you ever and just as much as you did before you even struggled with such a temptation, and just as much as you will after it. Go for it.
No, I'm going to say just for us to understand that practically too, because God doesn't have the insecurities, the rejection issues, all the things that we have that cause us to withdraw our love or to wait for someone to get to a certain point or to prove themselves to us. Like you say something to me, you might hurt my feelings. I might choose to be like, nah, I ain't gonna fluff with you like that no more, or do this or that. God isn't tempted by those, right? He doesn't need anything from us. He couldn't. And so that's why you don't get to a certain level of spirituality. He's like, all right, and now I love you more, or now you have more access to me. And so I just wanted to break that down practically as we talked about it for us. That's why God is consistent. He's unmovable. He's the same because he's not doing things for the reasons. He's doing it from his abundance just because. So
yeah,
Jay,
that's what you got to depend on, man. I mean, I've had moments, let's take away from, the typical sexual thoughts or whatever, man. I've had moments where I've wanted to demonize people based on what they did to me or what I felt betrayed me. And so because I was putting myself in the presence of God, which in those moments, man, that's where you got to cling to him the most. It's not where I get most distant. It's where I cling to him the most, because I now recognize that I am capable of resetting myself in a lot of ways. I'm capable of destroying someone in my mind and in my heart and not even doing it outwardly because of what I feel they did to me. And so I had to just reminding myself of what God is saying, what God has promised. And I get in my room every day to this day. And this gratitude list that I do every day now, I add a little bit of flavor to it on the last question of why is today going to be a good day, man? Can I let you know just what I remind myself of? That I'm loved, wanted, chosen, and redeemed by the greatest love. I am one handsome man of God. Absolutely, I am a man of character, a man of integrity, and a man who is honorable and of love. All right. I will make right decisions and responsible decisions with where I am today. And I'm right where I'm supposed to be. That's an everyday thing that I'm reminding myself of. We got to get to a place where we're willing to remind ourselves of what God says, man, because that temptation can overcome you easily, especially if it's something that we're not used to. And you'll convince yourself that God is viewing you in a humanizing way. That is what we're doing in that moment. We're putting human characteristics on God, as if God sees us as if what we were trying to convey to a best friend who now sees us differently because we had a moment of vulnerability and they couldn't handle it. So they left. And so we think, oh, okay, well, God's going to do the same thing too, but God is greater. God done seen it all. God done see. There is nothing God has not seen, and there's not a sinner God has not saved. There is not a person that God has not redeemed, that God has not healed, that God cannot heal, that God cannot redeem, that God cannot save. He's seen it all. And so I think that in its own right is so comforting for me to even step into that space when those things are occurring. Because it just does so much. It does so much. We have if you had anything else to add to that, go for it. We had another question. You're on mute.
No, I thought that was beautiful. I was actually about to insert Rye McFly's question for you because I thought it was en route of what you were talking about a little bit.
Sure.
Did you already see it?
How do you think you could discern the hearing of his voice or feeling? Ooh, I like that question. Yeah, I would say the best place to start is always his word. God will never go against his word. And so in order to know how to discern his hearing, I have to first know what he said. The role of the Holy Spirit, he does three things specifically, of course, a multitude of things, but these three mainly: conviction, remembrance. He brings up to remembrance the things that have been spoken to you, which means I have to be in the vicinity of what he's saying to hear it. So he's reminding me of what he's spoken. He is convicting, right? And he is, I believe, I don't want to misquote it, but it's something along the lines of moving before me. So he's going before me in so many things. So what I would tell you is that I have to get into his presence. I have to make time for it. Back to what we were saying earlier. I got to make time to spend time with God. The more time I spend with God, the more I'm going to get familiar with his voice. I mean, it's much like, your parents, man, your parents, close ones, loved ones, like
homeboys. Yeah.
The homeboys, man, you spent enough time with them. You know their lingo. You know what they say, how they say it. So if somebody were to come and say something different or say something crazy, the people you're around enough to know, man, he wouldn't say that. That don't even sound like him. How do you know that? Because you spent a lot of time with that person. So their lingo, how they talk, how they're moving. And it's the same with God. The more time I spend with him, the more I'm able to do that. And I will address this too, feeling his presence. I'm not necessarily going to say one way in which like I can feel his presence or something of those sorts. I think there's a lot of ways that can happen. Sometimes it feels like a weight. Sometimes, you're just being worship, man. You just reflect on what God's doing and it can bring you to tears. There's a presence of peace. Now we do know there's descriptions to it. There's presence of peace. There's presence of joy. There's presence of satisfaction. There's presence of all these different great, pure attributes of God when he's there. But I don't ever want to just solely limit it to a feeling. Sometimes I don't feel the presence of God. But I do know, okay, and this is kind of where a knowledge thing comes into play. When I get into his space, man, I know that God is present. I'm choosing to believe and rehearse what God has promised in his word, that he is present, that he is here. It's much like, again, I used an analogy like this maybe last week. Sometimes, again, and this is a good thing to take away. I want y'all to write this down. If y'all got some notepads, y'all got some pencils, man, I want y'all to write this down and replay it. I want y'all to catch this. Okay, this is what a coach would say, salad worthy. I'm gonna hold on to it. This is good right here. Your heart should never lead your mind. I'm gonna say that again. Your heart should never lead your mind. Because your heart is oftentimes what we attribute to our feelings. And our feelings are wishy-washy. Here one day, gone the next. I feel this way one day. I don't feel that same way a couple days later. So now if I'm allowing my mind to follow my heart, I'm going back and forth. But if I submit my heart to my mind, which does demand that we get healing mentally, which of course comes through Christ, right? Understanding who Christ is, growing in Christ, right? I got to get connected there. Right now, when my feelings sway, I can remain stable. I have the opportunity to remain in stability because my mind is renewed. This is why Paul doesn't say be transformed by the renewing of your feelings. He says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That produces stability. So if I'm going to actually be able to rest in the presence of God, even when I don't feel it, it's because I know that God is with me and in the room. because God has a space here. And even in the act of me praying, I'm believing he's hearing me. I don't think we really take into consideration how much faith is required for us to believe that in the midst of prayer, there's someone else on the other side listening to every word we're saying. That is literal evidence that we are genuinely believing that God is here, that God is listening, that God is present, even when I don't feel it. There's many times I've woken up, I don't feel like reading, I don't feel like studying, I don't feel like getting into my space of prayer, but I do anyway, because I know what it does for me. I know who he is to me. And even when I don't feel it, I know he's present. And so I hope that answers your question a little bit as well. I know I can discern his voice from others and even my own by knowing his word, making time to spend time with God, much like other relationships that we create. And in terms of feelings, this is where the mind and the transformation, the renewing of the mind comes into play, because that's what creates stability. Because if I just allow my heart to lead me, I'm going everywhere. That's how we end up feeling crazy and being real anxious. Oh, I don't feel like God's hearing me. I don't feel like God's hearing me. That's the stories that we're writing in our mind. That's not from a place of stability. That's a place of chaos. That's where our feelings rest. So even if you don't feel it, get to a place where you're genuinely understanding, man, God, I believe that you're here. I know I may not feel you right now, but I genuinely believe that you're here, because your word says that you would never leave me nor forsake me. Your word says to get in the room, close the door, because that's where I can encounter you. That's what you said. So I'm believing on your word. I'm believing that you're going to honor your word, and that's who you are. And the more that you stay there, the more that you rest there, and that becomes something that is a part of a perhaps routine, daily habit, daily discipline. You're not really going to rest on whether or not you feel it, because you know he's there, and there's going to be a track record you build to prove it because of how he's shown up in the spaces and the moments when you didn't feel it. And that's a whole different world. So hopefully that made sense. If you had any follow-ups, please follow up. Let me know. I think that was really good question. Yeah.
No, that was a really good question. Let us know if that helped. MVP. Like he killed that. And then I think this is our last one. Let me know if anyone else is out there. Last call. But my man Twister had a great question.
There's one more or two above it.
Oh, is there? Okay. I'm tripping.
We can do Twisters, and then we can come back to.
Should we go? No, I don't want to skip anyone. Yeah.
Okay. I got you. No, I get you. I get you. A Spear Light. Hopefully I said that right. He asked, what are your thoughts on people who are scared to seek or indulge in relationships due to them being scared of their burdens hurting those who they might love in the future?
Ooh, I'm seeing here. I got to read it. That was a good long question, like a question from school, like a word problem. I got it. Okay. What are your thoughts on people who are scared to seek or indulge in relationships? So they're scared to be in relationships because they're scared of their burdens hurting those who they might love in the future. That's good. Okay. Yeah. Okay, two things. I'm gonna give you the spiritually mature answer and the spiritually immature answer. And that sounds weird. Like, wait, why are you giving me two, man? Well, think about it, man. Like, I'm not giving my daughters the same advice to get in shape as maybe Grape, just because their bodies have matured. They're on different plans. They got like different complete understandings on the world. And so a lot of things with my daughters, I'm just working through the motions, having them be consistent. There's just different things that aren't as much of the priority because it's a process. And I think we go through things as we mature spiritually. And there's certain things that answers we give that some people aren't ready for, man, because it almost sounds wrong just because of where their maturity level's at. But so here's what I'm saying. Man, I don't think that your burdens can like impact someone else in that kind of way. So like, again, you're a little bit vague though, so I'm being general, but like, let's say you have mental health issues. Okay. So I don't believe that that's how like necessarily burden works. Like I think you can inconvenience people and stuff of that nature, but like, so like if my wife has mental health problems, I can look at that so many different ways. Just like we were saying with temptation, like that doesn't have to be bad necessarily. That doesn't have to be something that is a burden for me. And I actually don't look at any of my wife's physical or mental health issues as a burden on me. Again, because it's all about my perspective on it. I think it's similar to pain, man. So like, this is how nuanced it could be. Like if I were to punch Grape, you guys would be like, oh, Dion caused him the pain. And yes, I played a role, but his body was the one that sent the signal of like, all right, let's cause pain so we know to bring attention here. And the pain and the suffering that most of us feel, like when we say burden, because I don't think you actually meant like it was like an actual weight, but maybe like some mental stuff that you might be putting on them. All of that is self-created. Like, okay, I got a practical, funny example. Me and Grape were playing multiverses, and I had the same argument to him that I had to Twister Nick, and I got Grape to feel a burden, I guess you could say it. I'm joking here. This is obviously light. And he went and changed his character. He's like, all right, I'm gonna practice and use a different character for the tournament. But it wasn't me creating the burden. Yeah, I supplied the raw materials of the words that I said, but it was Grape transmuting it and being like, all right, cool, fluff him, I'm gonna change. Because I said the exact same things to Twister Nick in chat, and he was like, hey, brother, I'll be there with Shaggy. You know, just as positive and happy as Nick is. And it's because, but some people, and there was another brother in chat who ended up changing his mind. He was like, oh, I'm just trolling. But he was like mad at everything I was saying. And he was like really almost like pissed. But it's like, but Nick and Grape weren't. And so you could see there was 3 different reactions from the same words coming out of my mouth. And it didn't just, and I didn't say 3 different things. And so it was their interpretation of it that created the burden or not the burden. And so I think the most spiritually mature answer is to almost play both sides. I don't think you lose your intentions because you're being mindful of the other person, which I think is powerful. You hold that at the same time that you also understand that even if that person were to feel a burden, right, it isn't you that's genuinely creating it. Because let's say we decide that you do have some serious mental health issues that you need to work on. And I don't think that's bad for you to say, you know what, let me work on those, try to improve them so I can be more effective. Maybe I'm poor at communicating, things of that nature. Even if you figure those out and you are 10 out of 10, we can't find anything wrong with how you operate for a relationship. They still, because it's in their mind, could find things that you do that are a burden to them, and they'll project it as if like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. And it's all based off their past programming. And so that's why you can't lose it, that understanding, because then you'll almost create a burden on yourself that they said that you can get so lost into fighting something that isn't real. You can be trying to lift a burden off of someone that you're not creating. And so you got to understand that. And even when someone in the relationship does feel a burden, and okay, like I said, so let's say I was cussing my wife out every time we try to talk. We can say that's like a burden because that's just not a polite way to talk to people. We know, as we hear at Bible study, God is not cool with that. But I don't want my wife to forget about her divinity, her strength as a human. That does not mean it has to be a burden on her. And let's say I do realize, though, that I'm trying to work on that. I can do everything to try to move past it, and she may want to cling to it and forever call it a burden. And I see so many people almost held hostage by their past mistakes because they think someone else has the key. And I hope you got that, because it's a little bit nuanced. And so my point is, please understand that. And then, yeah, I think it is powerful to use all the mindfulness tools we talked about earlier. You might have to watch the replay. But yeah, do the work so that you wouldn't be like, I don't think all things need crazy spiritual answers. Like if you an a-hole, you know what I mean? Let's work on not being an a-hole as you move into the relationship. But just be careful with that wording of burden.
Yeah.
And you causing it on them. All right, go ahead. Great.
No, if you're done, I can go.
I'm done.
Okay, yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful stuff. I guess what I heard in some of that aligned with what you shared was a few things. Sometimes what we may wrestle with is perhaps the stories that we're telling ourselves on why we feel that, this, what I'm sharing with this person, what I'm experiencing with this person, I'm perhaps transitioning or a burden onto them. I don't want to be a burden. And so my question that I would ask to jump it off is, where did that start for you? What was the beginning to you feeling like a burden? Who told you that you were a burden? Did somebody say that? Was that an assumption you made, trying to read between the lines? Those kinds of things are always helpful. But to just answer the question alongside of it, man, I think as believers, we actually have evidence that we ought to carry one another's burdens. Now, in the manner in which we do this isn't necessarily saying that I treat my friend as a therapist or they treat me as a therapist. But rather, when we are in struggles, when we are in maybe perhaps differing seasons in life, I'm having an issue in an area, they're having an issue in an area, we have the capacity, we ought to carry some level of capacity to support one another in that, helping each other through. If I think about Galatians 6 verse 2, and then there's another chapter of scripture I want to bring to you too. Galatians chapter 6 verse 2 reads this. It says, verse 1 says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions, and so on and so forth regarding pride, and for each one should carry their own load. So I just bring that specific verse 2 to mind, because in the community, man, we actually ought to help one another through our issues. And it's not necessarily saying that you have to have the answer or they have to have the answer for your problems, because presence does a whole lot more than maybe perhaps having an answer to a lot of things. But it's just knowing. I think there's a lot of comfort in knowing that when you're in struggle, someone else is in struggle too, because that lets you know that you're not alone, and that you have somebody who may be in their own struggle, but nonetheless is struggling, and you can actually be in that space to support each other and hold capacity. So that's that. But I also want to say this too, that relationships require that we take up space. Something new I'm learning, something new I'm still processing through. But I do think it is something that is fair to share in this space if you're willing to receive it. Relationships require that we take up space. And essentially, all I'm saying in that is that if I find myself creating a space for somebody to not only be their authentic selves, but to be as vulnerable as possible, as transparent as possible, and yet I feel as if I don't have room to be or do the same, then what we have is a very imbalanced, unequally yoked relationship. And what will continue to happen is you're going to continue to feel not only that you're a problem, right? Or that they are the problem, if it's the reversed, but you're actually not going to get anything out of the relationship, because you're always going to be drained and feel drained and perhaps do the draining. So what we have to do is realize that I am actually able to take up space here. Just like I want to create a space for that individual, they also have to be willing to create such a space for me. And we can both work on how much we are able to give to one another. But nonetheless, that's, I think, in a lot of ways what relationships require. I can't create a connection with somebody and not feel like I can be my authentic self and as vulnerable as I'm allowing them to be. I don't think that's a very good relationship to carry. Now, we also have to be mindful of the type of relationship that is, because sometimes we may be confusing friendships and good relationships for mentorships that we actually have, and people that may be in our lives that we're called to pour into. Because there are some people that you're connected to that you're not supposed to have that level of connection with them, where you're telling them all your secrets and struggles. and all these back and forth. Sometimes there's some people you're connected to where you're just supposed to be able to be, a mentor to them, discipler to them. You're supposed to help them in some kind of area, some insight that you have that you can deposit into them to help them through their things. And maybe they don't have the capacity to give that back to you. But this is why you also make it an importance to get into community and be surrounded with people who do have the capacity to give you what you need, because that is actually how you're going to continue to be able to fill up those that you're called to serve. And that is what's really helpful. James is a really good place for this too. And it's not just speaking to connection and community, but it speaks to healing. James chapter 5, verse 16 reads this. This is probably one of my favorite verses out of James. He says this, or 16 rather, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. So confession, this is so interesting. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other. Okay. So in some way, shape or form, confession and healing is a horizontal deal. Okay. I can pray to God and he's going to forgive my sins. No doubt about it. Right. In fact, scripture tells us that when we repent, he takes our sins, he casts them into the deepest of the seas and forgets them. It's no more. The only people that remind ourselves of our own sins is us. God literally forgives us and forgets it like that. That's how amazing he is. And when it comes to actually communicating with another individual of our issues and our struggles and needing accountability and admitting to somebody else, that's a whole nother way, because not everybody responds in the way that God does. And because we're all human and have limited capacities, but still getting into community where we are called to confess to one another, because in that is healing. That's where that is. That is really where a lot of the help and transformation is. So I would say, and stress the importance of really, really getting an understanding and a clarity of perhaps where that thought is that you're being a burden is coming from, and then recognize and accept and truly, really, really aim to work to a place of believing that it is okay for me to take up space in a relationship. It is completely okay for me to connect with somebody, and in the midst of this connection, be willing to take up space by being vulnerable, being honest, being transparent about what I'm dealing with, what I'm struggling with, and perhaps looking to them for not maybe some guidance for some people, and other times just for them to be there and not feel as if when I come to you with something, it's always a burden. You're always bothered. You're always, up and leaving. You're never trying to really be of service and be present with me. You're always dismissive. And those kinds of things. I think that's a real telltale sign that may not be somebody that you need to continue a relationship with in that manner. But that doesn't mean that all your relationships are going to turn out that way either. And a lot of that type of thinking, man, is a lot of times a thought that's trying to convince you that if you open up, things are going to go bad. And if you open up and if you're honest, that things are not going to work out for you. And I'm here to go against that thought. Because actually, when you connect with people, that's where your healing comes from. That's where a lot of the help you are looking for will come from. And so something to think about as you're perhaps dealing with that, for sure. That I think. I know Twister had another question. I'm looking through the YouTube chat too. I think there was a question there. Do you ever feel like you realize too late? I know that was earlier, JRS. Hopefully we answered that question a tad. I know we didn't raise it specifically. I do believe we were in the thinking of just coming to God's presence in the midst of temptation. I remember that being a part of the conversation. You asked a couple other ones too. Man, I'm gonna be honest, when it comes down, hopefully this answer is brief too. I don't ever think, man, I think the only people that convince ourselves that we are too late is us. God is outside of time. God didn't even work in time. So God can't ever be too late with God. Now, of course, if we're talking about salvation, and getting right with God, having a relationship with him, well, I mean, when death rolls around, that's it, earthly. And so now is, we're in this presence, and it's time to give an answer. Right. And so we do the best we can with where we're at here. And of course, coming to God and coming to the saving knowledge of Christ while we have breath in our body, that's important. But in terms of like, I feel like it's too late. God is not going to forgive me. It's way past like, nah, I don't think you're ever too late. Not with God, not in that aspect. Is it a way to come back after taking a bite out of that forbidden fruit? And do you ever feel like forbidden fruit has a hold on you? Yes. Proof of it is Jesus going to the cross. That's probably the simplest answer I'll give all night. Absolutely, there's a way to come back from taking a bite out of the forbidden fruit. I want you to think about what happened in the garden. Adam and Eve take a bite of the forbidden fruit. They cover themselves in fig leaves to pretend to be something they weren't. God spots them out, but pay attention to what he does in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. He doesn't just leave them with a curse and, a woman will travail and have birthing pains, and a man is going to have to till the ground and sweat from the brow, right? Which doesn't necessarily refer to work being a curse as much as it is now you have to start from ground zero, as much as it maybe was in the garden where it was provided for you. All you had to do was maintain it. That's kind of a little bit of my own interpretation of it. But that's another conversation for another day. What I'm telling you, though, is that Genesis 3:15, there's something special that happens. Jesus sheds a lamb. God sheds a lamb and covers them in the skin of the goat's skin. This is actually a prophecy of what Jesus would come to do in the New Testament, be the lamb whose blood was shed for the remission of sins. And because he is that, not only are we able to come back from taking a bite of the sin or the forbidden fruit or making a wrong decision, however we want to label it, but we can also then, once we are restored and redeemed by coming to Christ, have an opportunity to make better decisions and live a better life afterwards. So absolutely, we can come back after that. Now, in terms of feeling like the forbidden fruit got a hold on you, I would like to know perhaps more of where that comes from. It could be quite a few things, and I don't really know exactly where maybe that comes from for you. So I would love to know a little bit more about that, if at all possible, and perhaps we can swing back around and deal with that question. Hopefully that was helpful, though, some of those thoughts. Coming to Twister asked a really good question in the chat. Let's see here. He asked, when you are in the middle of a temptation, what are some practical ways to snap out of that temptation and focus your eyes on the Lord?
I would take it back to the mindfulness practices that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Like literally, it may sound like excessive, but meditating, journaling, right in the middle of it. If you are struggling with feeling horny, like don't just sit there and feel it or fight it. Something I'd like to add too is I think often when we get these thoughts or these rough emotions, we try to suppress them, or we have to express them. It's usually one of the suppress or express. We get real fired up and like, nah, someone gonna feel what I'm feeling right now. I'm gonna yell at someone, or I have to express this horniness, right? I gotta go to this website, I gotta call this chick. Or we try to suppress it and be like, oh, it's wrong, don't do it, don't think about it. And we push it down. And hopefully you notice both of those end up coming back to you some way. Inside, I like how Great was talking about the outer and inner chaos. Like you can suppress it, it's just going to come back even stronger and internally, or you express it and you have all those both external and internal consequences. Maybe you do cuss the person out, now they mad, now you fighting or whatever it may be. And just want to make sure I don't get too distracted from my point. I think that those are, when we are taking the time to be mindful and journal, we can almost start to see things in slow motion. And so that allows us to, like I said earlier, disconnect so that we aren't our thoughts, we aren't our emotions. And so you can just watch them. That might sound weird, But you don't have to suppress the emotion. You actually don't even have to express it. You can just allow yourself to feel it. Sometimes I like to commentate myself, like I'm in the third person, like, oh, Dion is feeling sad right now because he's not getting what he expected in this area. And because of that, he feels, you know, whatever, forgotten, whatever it may be. And I can watch it. And because it's so long, I've just been monitoring my thoughts and I understand where a lot of my programming comes from, a lot of the things that trigger me. You'll start to see it in slow motion and you'll notice that, hey, I don't even have to give into this. And as you just watch it go, watch it come and go like all your emotions do. I think that flow that you feel is healing. Like I think we store these blockages in our heart. Maybe you had a past girlfriend that did this one thing that one time that triggered you and your mind took a snapshot. And now your current girlfriend is doing something similar and it creates this feeling in your heart. And you're like, whoa. And because that, you either tell her, hey, don't ever do that again. Or you start getting in your own head. What I want you to do is not label it as bad or good. It's just something that is. And the more you watch it and don't need to do anything about it, again, you can journal about it if you need to, but I think it's going to actually start to heal you a bit because you're going to stop being less triggered, especially when you start to prove to yourself moment by moment that you can handle these emotions. These emotions aren't bigger than you. They aren't stronger than you. And as you watch them, they lose their sting. And then as they come back around, they hit less and less. One of my favorite analogies is think of like a pond or just a calm water surface and these thoughts that come in that trigger you. We can even say temptations, as Nick asked, in his question. Imagine those as like rocks hitting the pond. And so now it's full of waves and ripples. What we tend to do in our suppressing or expressing is we get in there and try to smooth it out. We're like, nah, don't be wavy. Just calm down. But imagine doing that in water. It only creates more ripples, creates more waves and more of that disturbance. But if you just let that pebble hit, sit back and watch it, those waves will come, those waves will go. And the more you do that, you'll start to get so much insight. You'll start to clearly see that you aren't those things, that you have power over them, that even when they do show up in their mightiest way, as you sit back, they'll just go. And the next time it shows up, that intensity is so much less. So hopefully that makes sense, Nick. That would be my thoughts overall on just very practical things. Meditate, visualize in the middle of it. That's where you get the most value, man, while you're in it. And then the more you do it, you don't hop into an official meditation. You'll just be more mindful. The more you practice those skills, the more you're used to seeing your thoughts and using those different descriptive words. It's just in the moment. It's almost like bullet time kicks in and you're like, oh, I see Dion being offended and I see him wanting to go and express it and say this or suppress it and say that he shouldn't be feeling it and then he's better than that or this. And it's like, no, just watch it come, watch it go, realize it has no, sometimes it feels like emotion just possess you and makes you do things, but it doesn't. It's just little feelings that your heart generates and it doesn't stop you from working out. It doesn't stop you from doing truth projects because I promise you, I haven't felt amazing every truth project we've done. It doesn't stop you from working, being a father. It's just the orchestra of your life, the heart. And it's just, you just watch it. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think, I guess the only thing I would small, like just a little bit add to that is I've talked to, I don't know if it's been a handful of people, but there's one particular person that I remember speaking to, maybe over the course of like a year or so when I met them. It was so crazy. I remember it was like a phone call that we had and went into the wee hours of the night. This lady here, man, was going through it. Okay, just going through it. And she was kind of one of those individuals that would be like, yeah, they knew what scripture said or they were aware of it. It was like, oh, I just feel like, the dirty, filthy rags. I'm no good. I'm no good. I'm a sinner. This, that, and the third, right? And it just seemed like no matter how much scripture I reminded them of, it was something that they just would not come to a conclusion of at least grasping. Like, okay, I'm not. Yes, I'm a sinner and I have been redeemed. and my life is not supposed to be lived from a woe is me perspective. And so it may not be the direction that you're asking the question, Nick, but it's something that I do hear from it, where it's like, okay, well, how can I, because sometimes when you give the word to somebody and they're just in such a rut, it's almost like it goes in one ear and out the other. And it seems to be like there's something, and it's not to say that there's something else they need. Of course, I believe that the word is substantial and sufficient for all in any situation. But I've always been I've grown to be conscientious of dealing with the questioner just as much as I'm dealing with the question. And so when this has been asked from previous people who have been struggling in this space, it seems like there's like something that's being attributed to their life that they're like identifying with. And I love what Dion essentially was saying, which I guess is what I would kind of land all of this in, is I am not my mistake. One of the hardest ways, I think, to give yourself the availability to start listening in the midst of feeling guilt is when you begin to identify with the sin, you begin to identify with the mistake. So now it's no longer just a decision I made that wasn't the right one. It's now I am a bad decision. I am a horrible person. I am this, that, and the third. And that's where the shame comes along. So guilt ought to point you to repentance. It's that conviction, right? But shame is where I begin to identify with it. So I feel like in some ways that definitely can coincide when one leads into another. So how a practical way to listen once you're feeling guilty is, I got to be able to, I think for me, I need to write out what I'm feeling. I really do. I need to put words to what I'm feeling and just grow curious instead of trying to label myself in such a negative way. I need to just grow curious. Okay, what's up? Why am I feeling this way? What is really going on? What am I feeling guilty about? And guilt ought to always, and a lot of it always lead us to a place of repentance for sure. But I think what keeps us from doing that is thinking that not only we're becoming a mistake, so then we're slowly transitioning to shame, but then like, oh, now I can't come to the Father. I can't pray about it. God ain't trying to hear me. And that is the repetitive thinking that we have to put in reps with. A lot of what Dion was sharing, we have to put reps to that in order to really, really see that play out in our lives. So I typically think that there's a lot of something else there that maybe is being identified with. And so to speak to that person, you're not your poor decision. And in order to leave that mind frame of thinking, we have to be able to address what the decision was. And of course, reminding ourselves that God is bigger than our hearts. And at some point, we have to be willing to let go of our pride and ego that is telling us that God is great, or that our sin and wrongdoing is greater than God. So I think the best way to listen is to not identify myself with the mistake and write out some thoughts. Write it out. I need to be able to put words to it. Grow curious, and really lean into that, instead of all of the negative identifiers that are passing through my mind as a result of my decision. And I think the more you wash your mind with the word, the more that those things will pop up in those moments. That'll be really helpful. That's my thoughts, Twister. Great question, though. I love it. As I'm typing and sending this to you, the Holy Spirit is convicting me right now because I'm able to tell you all this, but also going through the same guilt and temptation. Yeah. And so, man, applying it, that's where it becomes real. You're not the only one, man. You're not alone in that. Applying it is where you'll start to see the difference. So keep moving forward in the right direction, brother, for sure. I think that's it, man. I don't think we got any more questions. Shout out to everybody that then pulled through. Yep, you are not your mistake, Jairus. No, sir. Amen to that.
Great combo, man.
Yeah, great combo, man. We appreciate you guys so much. Listen, homework this week is reading, I believe, is it Jeremiah 30 through 36. I believe we ended off on chapter 29 last week. So we got 30 through 36. So you guys keep reading through that. I'll put it in the Discord for sure. Or 29 through 35 is the text. So 29 through 35, you guys keep reading. Drop them in the chat. Shout out to David. He did drop his in the Discord. We're going to let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your night. We appreciate you guys so much. We're going to be back here next week, same time, same place, for another great conversation. Send an invite to somebody, bring them in. I mean, this stuff right here, man, just more than enough. It's, man, more than enough. So I need to see if Luke is around. Hold on. See, I was about to
the call. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, he's here.
Oh, he's here. Okay, I'm about to say, see, yeah, I getting better at this. So, man, YouTube, Twitch, Maverick.tv, we appreciate you guys oh so much. And until next week, until next conversation, God first. God bless.